In a world where the stars once shone brightly, there was an ancient guardian who had long been forgotten. For centuries, it lay buried beneath layers of earth and stone, its presence unknown to the people who lived above. But deep within its heart, a spark of life remained, waiting for the moment when it would be needed again. That moment came on a night when the sky turned dark, not because of clouds or storms, but because something far more sinister was happening. The first sign that something was wrong came when the stars began to flicker. At first, no one paid much attention. People assumed it was just a trick of the light, or perhaps some strange weather phenomenon. But as the days passed, more and more stars disappeared from the sky. The darkness spread slowly at first, like ink dropped into water, but soon it became clear that this was no ordinary event. It was as if the universe itself was being consumed by an unseen force. Far below the heavens, in a quiet village nestled between mountains, a young man named Kale noticed the change. He often spent his nights gazing at the stars, finding comfort in their steady glow. When they started to vanish, he felt a deep unease settle over him. One evening, as he stood outside his small home, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A faint blue light was emanating from the tallest mountain in the distance. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Kale didn't know what it meant, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it was important. The next morning, Kale decided to investigate. He packed a few supplies, a water skin, some dried food, and a small knife, and set off toward the mountain. The journey was difficult, with steep paths and treacherous cliffs, but Kale pressed on. As he climbed higher, the air grew colder and the wind howled around him. Yet the blue light grew brighter, drawing him closer. When he finally reached the summit, what he saw took his breath away. There, standing amidst the ruins of an old temple, was a figure unlike anything he had ever imagined. It was massive, towering over the landscape like a statue come to life. Its body was covered in dark, cracked armor that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. Its eyes glowed with the same blue light that had guided Kale to this place. The ground trembled slightly as the figure shifted, and Kale realized with a mix of awe and fear that it was alive. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, the giant turned its head and looked down at Kale. Its gaze was piercing, as though it could see straight into his soul. Kale wanted to run, but his legs refused to obey. Instead, he stood frozen, staring up at the being before him. Finally, the creature spoke, its voice deep and resonant, echoing across the mountaintop. "You have come," it said simply. "The time has come for me to awaken." Kale swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. Who are you?" he managed to ask. "I am the guardian of Earth," the figure replied. "Created long ago to protect this world from threats beyond your understanding. I have slept for centuries, but now the darkness returns, and I must rise once more." As the guardian spoke, Kale noticed something strange happening in the sky. The remaining stars were beginning to wink out, one by one, faster than before. The blackness spread rapidly, swallowing everything in its path. Kale felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the truth. Whatever was causing the stars to disappear was coming closer, and it was coming fast. The guardian raised a hand, pointing toward the horizon. "The enemy approaches," it said gravely. "And without help, even I may not be enough to stop it." Kale looked back at the glowing figure, then at the darkening sky. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. Kale stood there, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of what the guardian had said. He was just an ordinary villager, not a warrior or a hero. How could he possibly help this towering being fight against something so vast and unknown? But even as doubt filled his thoughts, a strange feeling stirred inside him, a mix of fear and determination. If the guardian needed help, then maybe it was his duty to step forward. After all, if no one else would stand against the darkness, who would? The guardian turned its massive head toward the horizon again. Its glowing eyes narrowed as though it could see far beyond what Cal's human eyes could perceive. "Time is short," it rumbled. "The enemy moves faster than I expected. You must prepare yourself." "Prepare?" Cal asked, his voice trembling slightly. "How do I prepare for something like this?" "You will learn," the Guardian replied. "Follow me." With those words, the colossal figure took a step forward, causing the ground to shake beneath Cal's feet. The young man stumbled but quickly regained his balance and hurried after the Guardian. They descended the mountain together, though Cal had to jog to keep up with the giant's long strides. As they moved, the air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made Cal's skin tingle. The forest below seemed darker now, the trees casting long shadows in the fading light. When they reached the base of the mountain, the Guardian stopped near a cluster of ancient stones half buried in the earth. These stones were covered in carvings similar to the ones on the Guardian's armor, symbols of stars, moons, and strange patterns that seemed to shift when Cal looked at them too long. The Guardian knelt down and placed one enormous hand on the stones. A low hum filled the air, and faint lines of blue light began to glow along the carvings. "These are relics of my creators," the Guardian explained. "They hold knowledge and power that may aid us. Touch them, and you will begin to understand." Cal hesitated. The idea of touching something so old and mysterious felt dangerous, but he knew he couldn't hesitate forever. Taking a deep breath, he reached out and placed his hand on one of the glowing stones. Instantly, a surge of warmth shot through his body, followed by a flood of images and sensations. He saw flashes of distant worlds, battles fought among the stars, and a great evil that devoured everything in its path. It was overwhelming, and Cal staggered back, gasping for air. What was that?" he stammered, clutching his chest. "That was a glimpse of what we face," the Guardian said grimly. "The darkness you see in the sky is only the beginning. This foe seeks to consume all life, leaving nothing but emptiness behind." Cal's heart pounded. He wanted to argue, to say that this wasn't his fight, but deep down, he knew he couldn't walk away. "Not now." "What do I need to do?" he asked quietly. The Guardian studied him for a moment, its glowing eyes softening ever so slightly. "You are brave to ask," it said. "First, you must learn to harness the power within you. The touch of the relics has awakened something in you, something you did not know existed. With training, you can use it to fight alongside me." Over the next few hours, the Guardian taught Cal how to focus his newfound abilities. At first, it was frustrating. Cal struggled to control the bursts of energy that occasionally flared from his hands, sometimes singing the grass or sending rocks flying. But slowly, he began to get the hang of it. By the time night fell, he could summon small orbs of light and direct them where he wanted. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As they rested briefly under the darkened sky, Cal glanced up at the stars, or rather, where the stars used to be. Only a handful remained, their light flickering weakly. The rest of the heavens were consumed by an endless void. Somewhere out there, the enemy was drawing closer. And though Cal still felt afraid, he also felt a spark of hope. Together, he and the Guardian might just have a chance. "We leave at dawn," the Guardian said, breaking the silence. "The final battle approaches." Cal nodded, gripping his knife tightly. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready, or at least he hoped he was. At dawn, Cal and the Guardian set off toward the edge of the world. The horizon was no longer a line where the sky met the earth. It was now a swirling mass of shadows, creeping closer with every passing moment. The Guardian moved with purpose, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground, while Cal followed closely behind, his mind racing. He had spent the night practicing with the energy he could now summon, but it still felt clumsy and unpredictable. Would it be enough to face whatever waited for them? As they traveled, the landscape changed dramatically. The green fields and forests gave way to barren wastelands, littered with jagged rocks and pools of blackened water. Strange winds howled around them, carrying whispers that sent chills down Cal's spine. It was as though the land itself was warning them to turn back. But neither Cal nor the Guardians slowed their pace. They pressed on, driven by the knowledge that failure meant the end of everything. Finally, they reached the border between the living world and the encroaching darkness. Here, the air was thick and cold, making it hard to breathe. The last remnants of sunlight struggled to break through, casting long, distorted shadows. In the distance, Cal saw something that made his stomach twist, a massive wall of shadow stretching endlessly in both directions. Within it, shapes moved like predators stalking their prey. "What are those?" Cal whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. "The enemy's servants," the Guardian replied. "They are drawn to destruction, feeding on fear and despair. We must destroy them before they spread further." Cal swallowed hard. "How do we fight something like that?" "We strike at their core," the Guardian said. "Their power comes from the darkness itself. If we can weaken it, we may stand a chance." Without another word, the Guardian stepped forward, raising one hand. A beam of bright blue light shot out, striking the nearest shadowy figure. The creature let out a shriek that echoed across the barren land before dissolving into nothingness. More shadows surged forward, drawn by the attack, their forms twisting and writhing as they closed in. "Stay close," the Guardian commanded. "Use your light." Cal nodded, focusing on the energy inside him. He held out his hands, and a small orb of light appeared, flickering weakly at first, but growing stronger as he concentrated. Summoning all his courage, he hurled it at one of the approaching figures. The orb struck true, causing the shadow to recoil and vanish. Encouraged, Cal tried again, this time creating 2 orbs and sending them flying in quick succession. Each hit drove back another enemy, but there were so many. No matter how many he destroyed, more took their place. The Guardian fought fiercely, its glowing eyes blazing with determination. With every swing of its massive arms, waves of energy tore through the shadows, scattering them temporarily. But even it couldn't hold them off forever. The darkness was relentless, pushing forward inch by inch. Cal's strength began to wane. His movements grew slower, his breaths heavier. He stumbled, falling to one knee as exhaustion threatened to overtake him. Just as he thought he couldn't go on, a deep rumble shook the ground. The Guardian roared, its voice filled with both pain and defiance. One of the larger shadow creatures had latched onto its leg, draining its energy. "Cal," the Guardian called out, "you must finish this. Find the source of the darkness and destroy it." Cal hesitated. Leaving the Guardian felt wrong, but he knew there was no other choice. Summoning the last of his strength, he ran past the battling figures, heading straight for the heart of the shadow wall. As he approached, he saw a pulsating orb of pure blackness at its center. This was the source, the thing fueling the endless tide of destruction. With trembling hands, Cal gathered all the energy he had left. He focused it into a single, blinding orb of light and hurled it with every ounce of willpower he possessed. The orb struck the dark core, and for a moment, everything went silent. Then, with a deafening crack, the core shattered, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The shadows screamed as they dissolved, vanishing into nothingness. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, and sunlight broke through once more. Exhausted but victorious, Cal collapsed to the ground, watching as the world slowly came back to life. As the darkness faded and sunlight returned, Cal lay on the ground, his body aching and his mind overwhelmed. The battle was over, but it felt surreal. Just moments ago, the world had been on the brink of destruction, consumed by an endless void. Now the sky was clear again, painted with soft hues of orange and pink as the sun rose higher. Birds chirped in the distance, and a gentle breeze rustled the grass around him. It was almost as if the nightmare had never happened. The Guardian stood nearby, its massive frame towering over the landscape. Its armor was cracked in several places, and faint trails of smoke rose from its wounds where the shadows had attacked. But despite its injuries, it still radiated strength and calm. Slowly, it knelt down beside Kale, its glowing eyes softer now, filled with gratitude rather than urgency. "You have done well," the guardian said, its deep voice warm and steady. "The world owes you a great debt." Kale shook his head weakly. "I didn't do it alone. You were there every step of the way." The guardian nodded. "True, but it was your courage that turned the tide. Without you, I could not have succeeded." For a moment, neither spoke. Kale stared up at the sky, watching the stars reappear one by one. They twinkled brightly, as though celebrating their return. He felt a sense of peace wash over him, something he hadn't known in days, or perhaps ever. The weight of responsibility that had pressed so heavily on his shoulders began to lift. "Will they come back?" Kale asked finally, breaking the silence. "The shadows, I mean." The guardian paused before answering. "The darkness is eternal. It may retreat for now, but it will always seek to spread. That is why guardians like me exist, to stand against it when it rises again." Kale frowned. "And what about me? Am I supposed to keep fighting too?" The guardian's expression softened further, almost like a smile. "That choice is yours to make. You have awakened a power within yourself, a gift that few possess. Whether you choose to use it again is up to you. But know this, should the need arise, you are capable of greatness." Kale thought about those words for a long time. He wasn't sure if he wanted to take on such a heavy burden again. Fighting the shadows had pushed him to his limits, both physically and emotionally. Yet, at the same time, he couldn't deny the feeling of purpose he'd experienced during the battle. For the first time in his life, he had truly mattered. Eventually, Kale sat up, brushing dirt off his clothes. "I don't know what I'll do next," he admitted. "But I think I want to be ready. If the darkness comes back, I want to help stop it." The guardian's glow brightened slightly, as though pleased by his answer. "Then I will remain here, watching over the world. And if the time comes, I will find you once more." With that, the guardian rose to its full height and took a step back. Its form began to shimmer, becoming translucent, until it vanished completely, leaving only a faint trace of blue light lingering in the air. Kale watched silently, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. Though the guardian was gone, he knew it hadn't truly left. It was simply waiting, ready to protect the world when needed. Kale stood slowly, stretching his sore muscles. He looked around at the recovering land, taking in the beauty of the sunrise. Life was returning, little by little. The trees swayed gently, and the sound of running water echoed in the distance. Everything felt alive again. Taking a deep breath, Kale started walking back toward his village. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time, he felt hopeful. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he had the strength to face them. And maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have to face them alone. When Kale finally reached his village, it was almost unrecognizable. The once bustling streets were eerily quiet, and many of the houses stood empty or in ruins. Some people had fled during the darkness, while others had been lost to the shadows that crept into their homes. Those who remained looked haggard and weary, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. At first, no one recognized Kale as he walked through the village square. He was covered in dirt and ash, his clothes torn and stained from days of travel and battle. But when one elderly woman caught sight of him, she gasped and called out his name. Word spread quickly, and soon a small crowd gathered around him, bombarding him with questions. "Where have you been? Did you see what happened to the stars? Is it really over?" Kale held up his hands, trying to calm them down. "It's over," he said firmly. "The darkness is gone. For now." The villagers stared at him in disbelief. They didn't ask how he had done it. They simply thanked him, tears streaming down their faces. For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to feel hope. Children peeked out from behind their parents' legs, smiling shyly as they saw the sun shining brightly overhead. Over the next few days, Kale helped the villagers rebuild. He worked tirelessly, clearing debris, repairing roofs, and planting new crops in fields that had been scorched by shadow. Though his body was still sore from the battle, he pushed through the pain, knowing that every little effort brought them closer to recovery. But as much as he tried to focus on the present, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was waiting for him. At night, when the village grew quiet and the stars reappeared in the sky, he would sit alone and stare upward, wondering if the Guardian was still watching over them, or if it had already moved on to another part of the world. One evening, as Kale sat by the edge of the forest, an old man approached him. It was Elias, the village elder, who had always been full of stories about ancient legends and forgotten heroes. He carried a wooden staff and leaned heavily on it as he walked. "You've changed, boy," Elias said, sitting beside Kale. "I can see it in your eyes. You've seen things most men only dream of." Kale nodded but didn't say anything. He wasn't sure how to explain what he'd experienced, not even to himself. Elias continued, "Long ago, there were tales of a guardian who protected this land. People believed it was just a myth, a story told to give us hope in dark times. But I think you've met it, haven't you?" Kale hesitated before answering. "Yes," he said quietly. "It woke up to fight the darkness." "And you helped it," Elias added, nodding knowingly. "That makes you special, Kale. Not everyone gets chosen for such a task." "I didn't choose this," Kale replied, shaking his head. "It just happened." "Maybe so," Elias said with a chuckle. "But life has a way of putting us where we're needed most. What will you do now?" Kale sighed, looking back at the stars. "I don't know. I want to help people, but I'm not sure how. Everything feels different now." Elias patted his shoulder gently. "Take your time, lad. The answers will come when you're ready." Weeks passed, and life in the village slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such an event. The fields began to grow green again, and laughter could once more be heard echoing through the streets. But for Kale, the sense of unease lingered. He felt restless, as though he was waiting for something, though he didn't know what. One night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, he noticed a faint blue glow outside his window. His heart skipped a beat. Quietly, he slipped out of bed and stepped outside, following the light. It led him to the edge of the forest, where the Guardian stood waiting. Its presence was both comforting and intimidating. The cracks in its armor had healed slightly, but it still bore the scars of their last battle. Its glowing eyes fixed on Kale, and for a moment, neither spoke. "You've done well here," the Guardian said finally. "Your village is healing because of you." Kale shook his head. "I didn't do much. They're strong. They would have made it through without me." "Perhaps," the Guardian replied, "but strength alone isn't enough. Sometimes people need someone to remind them of what they're fighting for." Kale looked down at his hands, remembering the power he'd wielded during the battle. "What happens now? Will the darkness come back?" "It will," the Guardian admitted, "but not today, and not tomorrow. For now, the balance is restored." Kale nodded, though the thought of future battles weighed heavily on him. "Will I see you again?" The Guardian tilted its head slightly, as if considering the question. "If the need arises, yes. Until then, live your life. Protect those you care about. That is all anyone can do." With that, the Guardian turned and began walking toward the horizon. Its form shimmered and faded, leaving only the faintest trace of blue light behind. Kale watched until it disappeared completely, then turned back toward the village. In the days that followed, Kale threw himself into helping others. He became a leader in the community, guiding the villagers as they rebuilt their lives. But deep down, he never forgot the Guardian, or the promise he'd made to himself. If the darkness ever returned, he would be ready. One evening, as he stood under the starlit sky, Cale smiled. The stars shone brightly above him, a reminder of the light that still existed in the world and within himself. Months had passed since Cale last saw the Guardian, and though life in the village had returned to a peaceful rhythm, he often found himself gazing at the horizon. The memories of their battle against the darkness stayed with him, vivid and unshakable. He knew the Guardian was out there somewhere, watching over the world, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his journey wasn't truly over. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, a traveler arrived in the village. She was a woman clad in worn leather armor, her dark hair tied back in a braid. A long sword hung at her side, and her sharp green eyes scanned the villagers with a mix of curiosity and urgency. She approached Cale, who was helping repair a fence near the edge of the village. "Are you Cale?" she asked, her voice firm but not unkind. Cale nodded, setting down his tools. "Yes. Who are you?" "My name is Lythera," she said. "I've been searching for you. Word has spread about what happened here. The darkness. The stars disappearing. People say you played a part in stopping it." Cale frowned, unsure how to respond. He hadn't told anyone outside the village about the Guardian or the battle. "What do you want from me?" he asked cautiously. Lythera hesitated before speaking. "The darkness isn't gone. Not completely. It's spreading again, farther away, in places untouched by it before. Villages are falling silent, crops are dying, and people are vanishing without a trace. I came to ask for your help." Cale felt a chill run down his spine. He had feared this moment would come, but hearing it aloud made it all too real. "Why me?" he asked. "I'm no warrior. I'm just me." "You're more than that," Lythera replied. "You stood against the shadows when no one else could. That makes you different. We need someone like you." Cale looked away, his mind racing. He thought of the Guardian's words, that the darkness was eternal and would always seek to return. He had hoped for more time, more peace, but deep down, he knew he couldn't turn his back on those in need. "What do I have to do?" he asked finally. Lythera's expression softened, though her eyes remained serious. "Come with me. There are others gathering, people who've seen the darkness and lived to tell the tale. Together, we might be able to stop it before it grows stronger." Cale glanced back at the village. The fields were thriving. The children were playing, and laughter filled the air. For a moment, he wondered if he could simply stay and let someone else take up the fight. But then he remembered the fear in the villagers' eyes during those dark days, and the hope they'd found when the stars returned. If he didn't act now, how many others would suffer? "I'll come," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. By sundown, Cale had packed a small bag with supplies: a warm cloak, dried food, a water skin, and the knife he carried during the last battle. As he left the village, the townsfolk gathered to see him off. They thanked him once more, their gratitude evident in their smiles and tears. Elias, the old storyteller, handed him a small charm carved from wood. "For protection," Elias said, "and to remind you of where you come from." Cale took the charm and slipped it into his pocket, nodding his thanks. Then, with one final glance at the place he called home, he turned and followed Lythera down the winding path into the unknown. Their journey began under a sky filled with stars, each one twinkling brightly as if cheering them on. Cale walked beside Lythera, listening as she spoke of the lands they would travel through and the dangers they might face. Though uncertainty loomed ahead, Cale felt a spark of determination ignite within him. Whatever lay in wait, he was ready, or at least, he would try to be. The road ahead was long and treacherous, winding through dense forests, rocky hills, and barren plains. Cale and Lythera traveled in silence for much of the first day, each lost in their own thoughts. Cale's mind raced with questions about the growing darkness and what they might face. He wondered if the Guardian would appear again, or if he would have to rely solely on his own strength this time. As night fell, they stopped to rest near a quiet stream. The air was cool, and the sound of flowing water provided a soothing backdrop. Lyra sat cross-legged by the fire, sharpening her sword while keeping an eye on their surroundings. Kale stared into the flames, clutching the wooden charm Elias had given him. It felt warm in his hand, a small reminder of home. "Tell me more about the others," Kale said after a while, breaking the silence. "The ones we're going to meet." Lyra paused, setting her sword aside. "They're survivors," she explained. "People who've seen the darkness up close and lived to tell the tale. Some have skills, tracking, fighting, healing. Others, well, they've been touched by it in ways that give them strange abilities. Not all of them trust easily, but they share one goal: stopping the shadows before they consume everything." Kale nodded slowly, trying to imagine meeting these strangers. Would they accept him? Would they see him as someone worthy of joining their cause? "What about you?" he asked. "How did you get involved in this?" Lyra's expression darkened, and for a moment, she didn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and heavy with emotion. "My village was taken," she said. "One night, the stars went out and the shadows came. I barely escaped. Since then, I've been searching for answers. And for people like you." Kale felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to lose something precious and to carry the weight of survival. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Lyra gave him a small, sad smile. "Don't be. That's why we're here, to make sure no one else has to go through that." The next morning, they continued their journey, moving deeper into unfamiliar territory. The landscape grew harsher, with jagged cliffs and dry riverbeds stretching as far as the eye could see. By the third day, they reached a ruined fortress perched on the edge of a canyon. Its stone walls were crumbling, and vines crept over its broken towers, but signs of recent activity, a faint trail of footprints, scraps of cloth caught on thorns, told them they weren't alone. "This is it," Lyra said, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. "Stay close." Inside the fortress, they found a group of people gathered around a makeshift campfire. There were 6 of them in total, each looking as weary and battle-worn as Cal felt. They eyed him cautiously as he approached, their expressions a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "This is Cal," Lyra announced. "He's the one I told you about." A tall man with a scar across his cheek stepped forward. "Prove it," he said gruffly. "Show us what you can do." Cal hesitated, feeling the weight of their stares. Slowly, he held out his hands and focused on the energy within him. A small orb of light appeared, glowing softly at first, then brighter as he concentrated. Murmurs rippled through the group, and some even leaned closer to get a better look. "He's telling the truth," Lyra said firmly. "He stood against the darkness when no one else could." The tension eased slightly, though not entirely. Over the next few hours, Kale learned more about the group. There was Marin, a healer with a knack for finding herbs in the harshest environments. Jorik, the scared man who led the group. Tessa, a scout with sharp eyes and a quicker wit, and 2 siblings, Finn and Ela, who claimed to hear whispers from the shadows themselves. That night, as they shared food and stories around the fire, Kale began to feel a sense of belonging. These people were different from the villagers he'd left behind, but they shared a common purpose. Together, they might just stand a chance against the darkness. But as Kale drifted off to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest battles were still ahead. The group spent the next few days preparing for their journey deeper into the heart of the spreading darkness. Each member brought something unique to the team, and Kale quickly realized how much he had to learn from them. Marin taught him which plants could heal wounds or ease exhaustion, while Tessa showed him how to move quietly through the forest without leaving tracks. Jorik, though gruff and distant at first, began to open up, sharing tips on how to fight smarter, not harder. Despite their growing bond, Kale couldn't ignore the tension that lingered among them. The siblings, Finn and Ela, often argued in hushed tones about the whispers they claimed to hear. Sometimes, they would stop mid-step, their heads tilted as if listening to something no one else could perceive. When asked what they heard, they only shook their heads, their faces pale with fear. One evening, as the group made camp near a cluster of ancient stone ruins, Finn suddenly bolted upright from his seat by the fire. His eyes were wide, and his hands trembled. "It's coming," he whispered hoarsely. "The shadows, they're closer than we thought." Everyone froze, exchanging uneasy glances. Lyra stood, her hand instinctively reaching for her sword. "What do you mean?" she demanded. Finn pointed toward the horizon, where the sky seemed darker than usual, almost like a stain spreading across the heavens. "They're moving faster now. We don't have much time." Jorik cursed under his breath and began barking orders. "Pack up everything. We leave at dawn." Cale stayed quiet, watching the horizon with a sinking feeling in his chest. He remembered the last time he faced the shadows, their endless hunger, their suffocating presence. This time, there was no guardian to stand beside him. It would be just him and this mismatched group of survivors. As the others worked to break down the camp, Cale wandered away from the firelight, needing a moment to think. He stared at the wooden charm in his hand, tracing its carved edges with his thumb. For the first time since leaving his village, doubt crept into his mind. Could they really stop the darkness? Or were they walking straight into a trap? Thinking too hard again, Cale turned to see Tessa standing a few paces away, her arms crossed and a wry smile on her face. She had a way of sneaking up on people without making a sound. "I'm just wondering if we're ready for this," Cale admitted. "The shadows are stronger now. What if we can't stop them?" Tessa shrugged. "Maybe we can't, but sitting around waiting for someone else to fix it won't help either. Sometimes, you just have to take the leap and hope for the best." Her words struck a chord with Cale. She was right. They might fail, but doing nothing was worse than trying. With renewed determination, he tucked the charm back into his pocket and rejoined the others. By sunrise, they were on the move again, heading toward the darkened horizon. The land grew stranger as they traveled. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes. Rivers ran black instead of clear, and the air carried an icy chill even in the sunlight. It was as though the world itself was being corrupted. On the fourth day, they came upon a massive fissure splitting the earth. At its center pulsed a swirling mass of shadow, darker and more menacing than anything Cale had ever seen. The group stopped at the edge, staring in stunned silence. "This is it," Jorik said grimly, "the source of the corruption." Cale stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Then this is where we make our stand." The group stood at the edge of the massive fissure, staring down at the swirling mass of shadow below. It pulsed like a living thing, its edges flickering with tendrils of darkness that reached out as if trying to grab them. The air was thick and cold, making it hard to breathe, and an oppressive silence hung over the land, broken only by the faint hum of energy emanating from the abyss. Cale felt his stomach twist with unease. This was worse than anything he had imagined. The shadows weren't just spreading. They were growing stronger, more alive. He glanced at the others, searching for reassurance, but their faces mirrored his own fear. Even Jorik, who always seemed so confident, looked uneasy. "What's the plan?" Marin asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. Jorik stepped forward, his scared face set in a determined scowl. "We hit it hard and fast. If we can weaken it enough, maybe we can destroy it before it spreads further. But how do we even fight something like that?" Ela whispered, clutching her brother's arm tightly. Her eyes darted nervously toward the shadows, as though expecting them to leap out at any moment. "We focus on the core," Lyra said firmly, pointing at the pulsating center of the fissure. "That's where its power comes from. If we can break through and strike there, we might have a chance." Cale nodded, gripping the wooden charm in his pocket for comfort. "Let's do it." The group descended carefully into the fissure, their footsteps echoing eerily against the jagged walls. As they approached the core, the temperature dropped even further, and the shadows began to writhe violently, sensing their presence. Shapes emerged from the darkness. Twisted, humanoid figures with glowing red eyes and claws sharp enough to tear through steel. "Stay close," Jorik shouted, drawing his sword. "Don't let them surround us." The battle began almost immediately. The shadowy creatures lunged at the group, their movements unnaturally quick and unpredictable. Cal raised his hands, summoning orbs of light to drive them back. Each burst of energy sent one or two shadows dissolving into nothingness, but more kept coming, relentless and overwhelming. Marin worked tirelessly to heal injuries, her hands glowing softly as she mended cuts and bruises. Tessa darted between enemies, using her speed and agility to strike from unexpected angles. Finn and Ela stood side by side, chanting in unison as they unleashed waves of sound that disrupted the shadows' movements. Even Lyra fought fiercely, her blade cutting through the darkness with precision. But no matter how many shadows they destroyed, the core remained untouched, pulsating steadily as though mocking their efforts. Kale knew they couldn't keep this up forever. They were tiring, and the shadows showed no signs of slowing down. "We need to get closer," Kale yelled over the chaos. Summoning all his strength, he hurled a massive orb of light directly into the swarm, clearing a path toward the core. Now, the group surged forward, fighting desperately to hold their ground as Cal pressed ahead. When he finally reached the edge of the core, he hesitated, feeling its immense power radiating outward. It was terrifying, but also strangely familiar, like the relics he had touched during his first encounter with the Guardian. Focusing everything he had left, Kale channeled his energy into a single blinding orb of light. He could feel it draining him, pulling at every ounce of strength he possessed. But he didn't stop. With a final cry, he hurled the orb straight into the heart of the core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening roar, the core shattered, sending shockwaves rippling outward. The shadows screamed as they dissolved, vanishing into nothingness. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, and sunlight broke through once more, flooding the fissure with golden light. Exhausted but victorious, Kel collapsed to his knees, watching as the world slowly came back to life.